I have to contact Apple support. Like the right AirPod for some reason has just started to die.
Oh, you and
So
Jawanza.
yeah, well, this happened before, and then I was able to actually reset it, and it worked. I've gone
Mm.
in, I've cleaned them out. I have done the whole reset, repairing all of that, and like there's just a little bit of sound. So if you want to talk about like balance, all of the sound is like over here. It's normally like centered, obviously. So I
Right.
got to contact Apple support and get that figured out.
Well, if you figure that out, you should connect with Jawanza because I think he posts about it like every 2 or 3 days, where one of them will be
Mhm.
like 99% and the other one will be like 3% all the time.
Okay.
So,
I mean, this one for some reason drains faster, but I think it's because they also have like the automatic mic switching, and I'm wondering if it defaults
uh,
to the right side with the mic. So I'm wondering if that drains it faster. But I remember
but
a
you're
couple
not
years
using the
ago.
mic here, right? You're using the external
No,
mic.
no, no. Just like on like regular calls and whatnot, or
Uh,
just phone calls and things. And when I use it there, because that's also when I've noticed they've drained faster. So in situations like this or other client project calls where I use this mic with the headset, they last much longer.
got it. Jen can't hear us, so we could probably talk about
No,
her
I
right
I
now.
can
Oh, shoot.
I can now.
Okay.
I have no idea why it just kind of disappeared and then came back. So, but I'll close a bunch of other things and maybe that'll help. I'll even close Charles, which might make me blip away for a moment. But
Okay.
no, seems
Yeah.
all right. All right.
All right.
Cool.
We
All
got
right,
it going.
we do. So, um, today's topic, it's a follow-up, Jason, to a conversation you and I had a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about it. We covered it from one perspective, but I think there's another perspective we could still talk about it. So this is being human at work, part two. So the previous conversation focused around that the thing we've always been taught, where you have like that professional version of yourself, and you're seeing more and more people drop that and be much more who they really are, and not so much their corporate selves. But the one thing we didn't talk about was the idea of being human at work and not being machines. At times, especially, I know the last several months have been draining for just about everybody for many different reasons. Like work's been stressful, and then you add on the stress of everything else that's happened. Productivity is going to take a hit, and people just aren't humans designed to stamp out the same number of widgets day after day after day. So how do we deal with this? Because I mean, I know like earlier today, for example, for me, I was fighting it. It was a battle getting out of bed. It was a battle just trying to get started, and there was stuff I was hoping to get done. So there's that pressure, but then also pressure from, say, management or whatever to get things done. How do we as
It seems
individuals deal
slightly
that?
passive aggressive.
No, not at all. No, not
Yes,
at all.
because Jason puts so much pressure on us all the time. But he doesn't need to because we feel the
And
pressure
then my next question
anyways.
was, but then my next question was going to be, how do we support others? Knowing, other people have, are just as, say, stressed out or kind of, to that point.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really difficult, but you hit the nail on the head. Is that, I mean, obviously from an individual level, we can talk about how we can be better at work and how we can work better, but a lot of it is environment driven, right? I mean, so if we don't have a supportive management team, if we have unrealistic targets we need to hit, it's a hard time not letting that impact how you operate. So I think the discussion really has to be at that level is, how do we run teams smarter? How do we think better? And how do we, look at us like we're humans, right? And Jim, you and I were on a client call the other day, and one of our clients said, I have to realize, and I do, that you're human, right? And that goes through the filters, I think, about how we work and how we set expectations. But historically, I think we haven't been treated as that. Employees have been treated as a number, as a resource. And, we do the math and say, well, resource X can produce Y, and that's great for us. And we kind of dehumanized it.
Yep, totally. So I'm really going to stir the pot now and mention, especially in the consulting world, when you have a set billable rate or set number of billable hours, you're expected to bill, per week and, spend on per week. That's where you just see the, mounting pressure there.
For sure.
I was hoping to get a bigger reaction from you on that one.
Well, you preach it to the choir. I know.
Yeah.
We definitely get that, but
yeah. And it was kind of central to obviously what we're doing. But I think regardless of the model, I think the overarching, it's easy to see and it's easy to pin it on something where you bill by the hour because it's very tangible. But even as employees, just think about our own past work history. We've been bucketed into this notion that our worth is our time at work. And for us that work in an office, that's typically 8, 9-ish to 5, 6, right? Like something in there, that's the expected time we work. And our value has inherently been based on the fact that we were in an office between those hours. So even if I'm not billing hours per se, that time that I'm there has historically defined our value. And it's unfortunate because it's so much greater than that. And to your point, Jim, I think once we're able to break away from that, I truly believe it makes for a much more rewarding, enjoyable work experience, which translates to a more enjoyable life experience. Because, to your point, some days it's not there. Like some days you struggle, and other days, you're hitting on every cylinder. You should be able to have the autonomy and the choice to say, you know what, I just don't have it right now. I'm going to walk away. I'm going to do something else, right? I'm going to go play with my kid. I'm going to just go hang out and do nothing for a couple hours. And that should be completely okay. But if we've built into the system that values that judges our value as the number of hours of work we put in, I think we're the ones that are putting that pressure on ourselves, right? It's like, well, if I don't sit here and feel like I'm working for 8 hours, then I'm not doing what I should be doing. And I just think it's a false paradigm.
And I'm just thinking back because I've been really lucky that over the last, 4 or 5 jobs that I've had, all of them have been remote. And while this is the first one that I had that was I don't have timesheets or anything like that. Not having timesheets hasn't changed things a ton for me, just because, for instance, for a while, I was one of the top billed consultants for a very large consulting agency / analytics vendor. And I even have a little award for it for a number of hours billed, but it wasn't the fact that I was putting in 60 or 70 hour weeks. To me, that was cool. It was, I was getting a lot of stuff that was very valuable for my client at a time when they really needed it. And while that was not sustainable, and I would never do that again for long periods of time, to me, the emphasis never was on the hours billed. It was the work delivered. And fortunately, all of my previous employers seem to be on board with that, even if on paper, not so much. But that does help a lot. To me, reframing it that way helps a lot with the feeling like a human and not a timesheet. Being able to focus on the work you're doing, whether or not you're following an hourly model, you can still focus on the hours, the projects you're delivering and the deliverables, rather than the hours.
For sure. So let me turn the tables a little bit, because I want to ask the two of you a question. And both of you have worked a considerable amount of time in a services-oriented role, meaning you're interacting with a client, with the public. So someone in your position, again, and we can abstract it from consulting and just looking at it more of a services role where you're interacting with a customer, how much of how either you're treated or you feel like a human in your role, how much of that impacts how you then turn around and interact and treat the customers that you're dealing with? Does that question make sense?
I think so. I think it's kind of hard for me because, especially with the last podcast on being human, for me, I don't have an off switch to that. I am very much my human self, whether you want it or not. So I just kicked off with a new client, and it was funny to me how jarring it was. Like, oh, they don't know me yet, and I have to be much more on my guard. And not that I'm like messing up all over the time with the clients that I that know me better, but it's more stressful when you haven't yet kind of established that, oh, I'm human, you're human too, nice to meet you. So yeah, there is always kind of that ice that you have to break with any new client. I'm trying to think if I have examples of folks where I never got past that, and nope, I'm just gonna keep on humaning.
Jim, what do you think?
See, it's kind of tough. Like, I guess I'm kind of along the same lines. I'm going to be me to a degree. I mean, I've had those clients that don't really care, and I guess it doesn't necessarily come from the job side per se. You know, being treated as human, and does that then reflect on client work? I don't necessarily think that has so much impact. Sometimes it's what the clients are looking for. I mean, I've had those clients that they could care less, right? You know, it's we do need these widgets stamped out, so it's like, okay, I've got a job to do. Fortunately, though, for every one of those, I usually have three that enjoy the other side. That when we come and visit, they maybe want to go out and have a drink or two after work just to shoot the shit, right? Or we start off regular calls with stories of just what's going on. And so normally I take my cues, from the client, and because you're going to have those clients from time to time that just need a job done.
Yeah. And the reason I was asking the question, because we started out the conversation about where do we attack this, and from an individual's perspective, how much leeway do you have if you're working within an environment that doesn't support that? And the reason I was thinking about it is right before we jumped on the podcast, I was talking with my mortgage lender who for some reason had tacked a late payment on, and I'm like, here's why you guys of what you've done is wrong. And I kind of laid out the argument, and I could tell that the customer support representative on the other side was empathetic, but really, their hands were tied. And maybe that's an extreme example because they work for a massive organization where it's very, very scripted. But even still, even if there was some leeway, I find myself thinking, how much impact does the individual have? Even if you do work in an environment that maybe doesn't look at customers as humans and looks at it more transactional, but you yourself, take a very humanistic view of things, how much influence can an individual truly have, right? Because we have a pretty broad range of listeners to our podcast. We have a lot of people that are in mid-management, maybe a few executive upper management. We have a lot of people that are doing like amazing things in more individual contributor roles, or even just kind of out there doing things by themselves. How much influence can the one group have versus the other? Again, coming back to my original thought, is this something that really has to come top down where we create the right environment? Or is this something that can be leveraged and changed grassroots by a few individuals saying, I may not be able to change the whole ship, but at least my little area, I can have a little change in how we do things.
I think it's a bit of both, of course. That you're going to need a bit of both. I just keep thinking back to of all the jobs that I've had where I felt like less human and more a widget maker. It was an internship that I had. And it was in France, so I don't know if some of it was just different work culture or what, but they were very about the appearances of, you need to look hard at work. That's what we're paying you, is to look hard at work. And little things like the train schedule. For most folks, the train would get you to the office by 9:04 a.m., or you could take the half-hour earlier train to make sure you're there well in advance. And rather than say, you know what, it's okay if y'all are 4 minutes late, because we get that that's just the way the train schedule is. We need everybody in before, because it's very important that we are there by that 9 a.m. to show management. And my boss would say, like, to me, it doesn't really matter, but you have to think of how it looks to upper management. So even though I'm okay with you coming in a little bit later and want to be reasonable, the appearances to upper management of when you walk through that door is very important. And I can't think of something less humanizing than that, that it does give the sensation that the appearance is much more important.
We're playing a part, right? And I think we talked about that quite extensively, didn't we, Jim, on our last podcast on the topic, where we talked about this need to play a role, right? Like we were an actor, some kind of a corporate actor, and we were playing a role. And that while we've made tremendous strides forward in how we work and how we look at work and all of that, that history of playing a role is still very apparent in a lot of what we do. And how do we unwind that? Because to Jen's story, I don't know if it is I think that thing's pretty pervasive across cultural barriers. I remember back to my first job, it was a very hot topic of conversation. And I share this story not to say that I was any kind of a big deal. I had no idea what I was doing on my first job out of college. I was trying to learn, but my team was mostly like 20, 21-year-old kids. And I think I was 21 or 22, my first job out of college. And we were all trying to figure out life in general, let alone work. And I think I just came with a little bit more experience. I had a master's degree, and I had spent a year teaching a college course. So I had maybe a little bit more experience than the rest of the team, but I was constantly finding myself in the middle or the low half of the curve when it came to being graded, like on my performance. And I had a very raw conversation with my boss at the time. And I said, can you help me understand what I'm doing wrong? I feel like I'm checking all the boxes that you want me to do from a work delivery standpoint. I'm actually going above and beyond in these other areas that you've challenged me for, yet when it comes to ratings, which dictate my pay, which dictate my bonuses, I'm always on the low end of the curve. And he said, you just have the appearance that you're not working very hard. And I said, I don't understand. That's not coming across in what I'm actually producing. He said, I know, but you have to realize that when people that don't necessarily work with you day to day look at you, they're judging you on the appearance of how hard you're working. And again, a lot of my team members, we were trying to figure things out in our first job, and you can imagine like scrambling around, and you look really busy. Everything's always hectic because like you just don't know what's going on. And for some reason, I just had a little bit more, and I earned the nickname Zen at the time. I was just a little bit more Zen and a little bit more calm. And that came across as you're just not working hard enough, right? So I think it's deeply built into kind of how we work. That a lot of it is about appearances. A lot of times it is about, well, do they have the appearance of working hard? And I don't know how we start to unwind that, because we can have the conversation all day long about judge me on the outputs, like what are we creating? But if that doesn't then change the way that we do things like promotions and pay and bonuses, and then I don't know if anything changes.
Well, 3 months of quarantine might have forced some folks' hands on.
I hope, maybe. Yeah.
Maybe, hopefully.
It's definitely shining a light on a lot of things for sure. So this could be a forced change for sure. I hope so.
Yeah, like I thought I saw something the other day. We're saying like 35 to 40% of people, have felt better working from home and want to continue doing so even after offices begin to open back up.
I hope so. And I still think we can take advantage of this time, because I think there are a lot of people that are seeing the advantages of this. And I don't want to say working from home or remote, just more autonomy in the job, right?
Exactly.
It's not about the location, it's about the trust and autonomy. And I hope that this is really helping shine a spotlight on that this is a much better way of working, a much better way of managing a team. But I am still seeing some concerning things, specifically on social media, where I'm seeing people saying things like, I feel bad that I'm not sitting in my home office for 7 hours a day, or I'm getting burned out trying to sit in my home office for 7 hours a day. I'm like, why are you doing that? Like, don't do that. You're at home. You have all of this freedom and autonomy now. Like, change that mindset that we have to be chained to our desk for 8 hours to be seen as being productive. So I still think, and it's hard, right? Look, the three of us have worked remotely for a long time. And I think a lot of the things that just come natural to us, it's hard for us to put that beginner's mind back on. For me, I started working remotely, 2007 or 8? Like, it's been 12 years. So it's hard for me to go back to the beginning to understand. And so when I see these people are like trying to recreate the office home, I'm like, what are you doing? But I was probably in the same situation early on, like freaking out, like, how are they going to know I'm working? How are they going to know I'm online? All of those conversations. So I think we have to think about that as well.
Yeah, totally. And I was just thinking back to Jen, when you were mentioning your internship. Mine as well. We've talked about me interning for a minor league baseball team, and we've mostly talked about me being a mascot, but we also worked in the front office, and this was a job where we were getting paid like $130 every week or even every 2 weeks. So I mean, it was we were getting paid next to nothing, but we were working 12 to 14-hour days. We'd be showing up at 9 a.m. and then if there was a home game, we were working through until the game was over, and we were leaving with the players. Or sometimes we'd be some of the last ones to shut the lights off at night. And I remember this one time, like, it was a grueling homestand. It was like 36 days of nothing but home games. And it was just one of those afternoons. A couple of us were standing around like this bullpen area where all the interns were, and we're just talking. We're taking 15 minutes just to kind of clear our heads before we go about the next thing. And the GM came running through, and he decided he'd rip everybody a new one, and then went to each of our bosses about it. And we're all just like, we're putting in tremendous amounts of time. We can't take 15 minutes just to cool off. And that was one of those things that always stuck with me is it's not necessarily about the hours of time people put in, but it's recognizing when you have long days like that, and like someone standing around for a few minutes doesn't mean that they're completely slacking off all day long.
For sure. And so, no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it's funny how many of these stories are about enforcing some blanket rule that doesn't take into account individuals. Because that is a surefire way to dehumanize folks.
Exactly.
Manage to the lowest common denominator, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and I think in that sense, it really comes down to trust, right? And if we're talking about autonomy and talking about giving the freedom to work how and when it's best for us, that really comes down to building trust. So, on that point, Jim, I'm interested because one of the things you called out in what happened?
Yep. No, I just dropped something. That's all. I dropped one of the little fidget things I play with while I'm talking.
Playing with Silly Putty.
I'm playing with this thing. It's like some kind of a Lego thing that
nice.
Is on this other thing of this raft that my 5-year-old built.
Oh, that's fun. All my Legos are moved from my office, and I didn't get to disclaim the ugly office behind me because I'm moving in 5 days. So
talk about being human. No.
Yeah.
I mean, it's perfect, right? I mean, and man, we can go off on a tangent on the whole Zoom thing.
Oh yeah.
It was fun at the beginning, and I can't remember who I was talking to this. Someone someone from the neighborhood came by and we were just chatting, and he was like, "This is really hard working from home," and I'm like, "Why?" And because again, like for us, it's like we've just done this for so long, so it's interesting to get his perspective. And he's like, "But man, I love the Zoom thing. It's so cool." I'm like, "I am so burned out on the Zoom thing," and he's like, "Why?" And I'm like, because like this is an opportunity, and I don't know if we talked about this last time, but if we did, I'm going to repeat it because I think it's worth repeating. I have found that these video conferences right now are so refreshing and amazing because it truly humanizes people, and even people that I don't tend to be intimidated very easily, but I probably put a little bit more emphasis on corporate titles than I should. And, I know like C-level people and senior vice presidents, and I kind of picture them in a certain way. And now I've talked
They
to
had their
these
dog
people.
barking in the background.
Yeah, it's so amazing, right? Like they're at home. I see their home behind them. They're in a t-shirt. Their dog runs in. Their kid's like out in the hall yelling that he needs to be wiped. I'm like, I love this so much. This is so amazing, right? Because it humanizes them, and kind of made me realize that I've made that mistake as well, that I've treated these people as something other than human because I've kind of got sucked into that corporatism, like, oh, that's like they're a VP, they're a C-level, they're an executive. It's like, but then you see them in their home and I'm like, no, they're human, and it makes me like them and respect them even more, right?
So for me, one of the big things that and this is kind of going towards another topic, but one of the big things that I really like about that, once the human element is introduced and we're not pretending we're not human anymore, is how much easier it makes it when there are mistakes or when you need to come forward and say, oops, I copy pasted an error and I need to now go back to the devs and tell them to switch this word out for that. Obviously, we try to avoid those situations, but when it happens, it's so much easier if you've already heard the person you're talking to's child say that they need to be wiped. Yeah, that it's a nice added bonus, I guess, of seeing each other as humans and making a little bit more room for that honesty, which benefits
Agreed.
everyone. Like it's just so much better if I feel comfortable coming forward and saying, oops, my bad, here's the fix, than hiding it under the guise of professionality.
For sure. And if that can be an output of this work from home through COVID, that would be amazing, because you're right. It is so insanely valuable, but so counterintuitive to either what we've been taught or what just inherently we think, that is, that we need to be perfect, right? And that we don't make mistakes. And if we do, then we try to find a way to cover it up or deflect it. And we see it all the time. Like, when businesses make mistake, when politicians say something stupid, unless that's, a certain politician, most of them go into damage control mode. And it's like, okay, how can we smooth this over? And it's the opposite of being human, right? Like, wait a minute, we all screw up, we all do things dumb, and let's own that. And so a quick side story on how I think insanely valuable this is, and I won't name the client because maybe they would be embarrassed, I don't know. But one of our current clients I met when I was at a previous company, and I was working with them. So this was, 10 years ago or so. And I made a stupid mistake, a very visible stupid mistake. At the time, I was running an optimization program for them. I had a test campaign where I was swapping out some images on their homepage for like the hero image slot, the big image on the homepage, and a couple of smaller images. And to test it out, I had some black boxes that just had the text hero image and like sub image one. And I was just using it locally to see if I could swap the images out right. I don't know what I did, but I hit go live on the campaign. And it was live for 20 minutes. So anyone going to this major retailer's website for 20 minutes and hit the homepage saw this big black box that said home hero image and some little black boxes underneath it that said sub image 1, 2, and 3. And I caught it, and I was cold sweats, embarrassed,
I
freaking out.
Lose it. Yeah.
I lost it. I stopped the test and everything went back to normal. And then I sat there for like 10, 15 minutes. I'm like, what do I do? It was only 20 minutes. Maybe no one noticed, you know, so maybe I just brush it under the rug. Maybe I blame it on Adobe and say, something went haywire with Adobe
Right.
Target. It wasn't me. I ultimately decided to own it. And I spent the next hour kind of doing a quick analysis of the potential impact it had and how many people were exposed to it. I called up our stakeholder and said, I screwed up. Here's what I did. Here's what happened. Here's the impact. And here's the controls we put in place so that won't happen again. And the response I got, I was not expecting. It was, let me give you a virtual hug. Like,
Oh,
we're on the same team. Like, I appreciate it. And it just deepened the relationship. There was so much more trust there. That client, that person, that human that worked at that company is now at a different company who is a client of 33 Sticks, and we work with to this day. And not because of that, but I think because of that humanness, I mean, we gained a customer for life of 33 Sticks at least,
Sure.
which has been, 7, 8 years. It's, when you kind of let that guard down and show like, I'm human too. And again, whether it's, your kids running in during a conference call or admitting that you screwed up, you kind of let that guard down that we don't have to be defensive. It's not to say we need to celebrate mess ups and things that don't go our way, but life is messy. We don't all have, to Jen's backdrop, a perfectly orchestrated bookcase with all the books perfectly laid out to tell a certain narrative, right? Like, no, this is just how we live, and what you see is what you get. And that's my feedback to my neighbor when he came over. I'm like, I'm so burned out on the Zoom thing because everyone keeps putting all these like things on their face, and because you could do the facial recognition and put ears on, and then they're like changing their background. I'm like, this is the opportunity I have to like truly see them outside of their corporate costume, to see them not playing a role. And it's bugging me that they're still covering it up. And I get it. Like, I think a lot of it comes from just not feeling comfortable being human, because being human at work has been a taboo thing and it's been very uncomfortable. But we're all in this right now, so let's just do it. And if we're gonna go back to it, but at least let's have this opportunity right now to kind of throw that costume and mask and role playing away for a while. Sorry, I just went off on.
No, I agree with all that. Well, and I think too, sometimes like if you make a mistake and you have to own it, how much easier that can be if the humanity has been established. But I also think a huge part of it is if the client knows how deeply you care, and sometimes that is also easier to show when the professionalism isn't the focus. I may have shed tears over internal search at a major online retailer. Of course, I cry really easily, so that doesn't really say all that much. But like, talk about an unprofessional thing to do, to be over in my cubicle like, I just want this to work. But at the same time, nobody can ever accuse me of not caring deeply. Actually, that's the caring. I care a lot. It's kind of my thing. But that's also part of that human element, no, I think I'm turning red a little bit, but that makes it easier when things do go wrong, or when you do need a break. If they've seen in the past that you care so hard that it it affects your professionalism, that it's much easier to come and go from it and approach it with sanity and health and all of that.
Yeah, and I think a good output of it, Jim, you were asking earlier, like, how do we support our colleagues and our friends and people we interact with? I think just by being human ourselves has a massive impact. Because I think that we've seen it in our work when we're able to do that. Whether the people we work with are comfortable doing that or not, it's hard for them not to treat us back as humans, right? Like the clients we work with, the fact that we are okay being vulnerable and saying like, this is what we have going on. And, I don't know what the conversation was, but I was talking with one of our clients the other day and said, so I think, Jen's taken the week off next week. And so I don't want to overburden her leading up to that. And so I'm trying to think about how I can properly manage things so she can go into her time off feeling refreshed. And I'm like, who says that? right? But
Thank you.
it
It
but
means
it's
the
be-
world to me too.
but it's because we're comfortable being, or uncomfortable maybe being human, and because we've shown that side of us, it's really difficult for the people we interact with not to turn around and treat us as humans. You know, if we weren't to do that, it's very easy for them to say, it's just Jen, she's a consultant. You know, it could be Jim, it could be Mark, it could be someone else. It's just a role. You know, just throw this at them. We don't even think about what they have going on in their lives. But because we do open up, we almost force them to think and see us as humans. And I think the upside of that is that they treat us, I think, on a different level than if they just saw us as a consultant, you know, someone they're paying a fee to come in and do some work for them.
And that's where I was going to go as well. And one of the things I found, you know, being genuine, being open, talking about things other than work, it's actually sometimes made it easier to push back when, say, the volume of deliverables starts to increase. It makes it easier to prioritize. A few weeks ago, I was having a one-on-one with a client, and we were talking, and I started kind of going off, we've got to get this done, we've got to do that. And she's like, wait, slow down. You know, we don't need all of that done right away. If you need to push, you know, and it was refreshing because I kind of got into that get shit done mode. And this is a double-edged sword for me, you know, just putting the head down and charging forward. It's good to get stuff done, but then sometimes I don't know when to pull back. And I was like charging through stuff, and she's just like, relax, calm down. We don't need it all done at once. We can take our time in getting these things out. Like some of these things we could push out a couple weeks. Like that's not our business. You know, we don't want you to burn out. And then just yesterday, you know, the conversation you and I had with another client said, I don't want to burn Jim and Jen out. You know, it's because we've been able to cultivate that. They don't look at us as that person that's stamping a widget for them. They're like, crap, I need them here 6 months from now when this thing I'm most likely is going to happen. I have to be careful about it.
And then let me piggyback on top of that to tell another story, but more to kind of put it back to you. I hope both of you feel get a lot of fulfillment out of the fact that we're creating something amazing that's even happening. And I was thinking about it the other week because one of our clients called me up, and she is on an account that Jim leads, and said, "Is Jim okay? I'm worried about Jim. Like he's working a lot. Like, why are you making him work too much? Like, are we putting too much pressure on him? Tell him he needs to like balance things out. I'm just worried about him burning out." And I'm like, this is amazing. Like, what have we created here that we have clients that are paying us good money coming back to me and saying, I'm worried about one of your employees. Are we working them too hard? Like who does that, right? So I hope that you guys kind of have recognized that in the work that you've been doing, that we have been able to cultivate something a little bit different from a humanistic standpoint. And the companies that we work with are full of they're people. And we've talked about it, right? Like we get paid by a company, but we work with people. And in fact, I've started talking with prospects as they show interest in wanting to work with us. I said, one of the things I need you to truly understand is while your company is going to pay us, our goal, our motivation is to make you successful, to make you happy. Because if we can do that, your company will be successful. It just will absolutely happen. So anyway, I was just reminded that as you were telling that story, Jim. And I think it's something we should have a lot of pride in, that through being humanistic in how we've worked has touched the lives of a lot of people. And it's not only coming back at us and that care that they're showing to us, I truly think it's impacting how they're working with other people as well. So while we're helping them with analytics, while we're standing up analytics platforms, while we're running optimization programs, I think we're doing something much greater than that we don't ever have a line item for in our SOW. And that's that we're showing people a different way that they can work. And I truly believe it's not only making them happier, it's making the people that they interact with happier, because they're taking that and they're kind of spreading that message.
Yeah, and I think we're talking about the same person, by the way. So
Probably.
And yeah. And I mean, I think that kind of goes back to some of the initial questions I asked at the beginning. How do we we support others. Like there's your internal colleagues, but then there are those that you work with that may not be direct colleagues within the same organization. It's recognizing that, and I'll tell you, it feels good when you start to get that feedback that they see you as a person, and then they want that long-term relationship. They're not looking to just get this project completed, this deliverable done, and then whatever happens after that happens.
Well, and I think so much of it is just reciprocal of if we treat our clients like humans, then certainly there have been times when we've looked at various clients and been like, oh, they are very stressed. We need to see what we can do to help them out. I'm worried about so-and-so burning out. How can we help other people be aware of their load? And that type of, it's exactly what the clients that we've just been discussing were doing for us. It's just it builds off of each other.
Yeah, and I think that's right, and it reminds me of a quote. And if I haven't mentioned, well, I'm going to ask, do either one of you know what one of my top 3 favorite books of all time is?
Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance is one.
So Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance is one of my all-time favorite books, and I've read it 8 times. And there's a quote in there. Jen was spot on. She was channeling.
I love trivia.
That's awesome. So there's a phrase in there where they're kind of talking about this, and the narrator's talking about all the change that he wants to make in the world. And he's like, I just don't think you can do it. You can't change the world, but you can change the world. And the quote is, the place to improve the world is first in one's own heart and hands, and then work outward from there. And I think we've seen that firsthand in how we work. Number one, we have to embody it ourselves, right? Like we have to embrace, this is how we want to work. This is what we value. If being human at work is something that is critical to how we work and operate, we have to embody that first. There's no way we can teach that or influence that unless we fully embody it. And then from there, we allow that to influence. And then that influence spreads and grows. And I've shared it many times. I think I shared it on the podcast where Todd from Christian Science Monitor was a guest. But it's a story I love to share, because not specifically about being human, but it is about being human. Just this autonomous way in which we work, we fully embodied that. And without even talking about it, it just exudes from how we do everything. And Todd, I think it made a very, very real impression on him. And, we improved the way that we worked, and then we worked outward from there. And with Todd, and I won't take full credit, but I'm taking a little bit of credit. He works for a publishing company, 100-plus-year-old publishing company that's probably pretty set in its ways of how they do things. He went to his management team and said, I want to move my family to Hawaii for a year. And is Jim frozen?
I don't know. He might be.
I think Jim is frozen.
He's listening very intently.
He's very intent, and it's freaking me out. Now I can't finish my story because it's freaking me
Todd
out.
moved to Hawaii because Christian Science Monitor was very cool.
Yeah, right. Like, and they were so cool about it. He said, like, I've seen this new way of working. I've seen. Oh, we lost Jim.
No, we did lose Jim.
I've seen this new way of working, and I want to try this. And they did it, and it was amazing, right? So, yeah, I mean, back to your point, Jen, and to how Jim queued this up earlier. Like, it's a huge thing to solve, but we can definitely solve it with ourselves. And we have the opportunity as consultants to work with like tons of different people. So I think we have a lot more influence than maybe even most people that work in the business world, because we get to put our tentacles in lots of different businesses and organizations. So, hi, Jim.
He's back.
Yep.
I was in the middle of my story and I like stopped cold because you were like having this
Scary.
intense stare at me. I'm like, did Jim freeze on us? What is happening here?
My Wi-Fi went down, but I'm happy to see that the
Yes,
recording is
Yeah.
still going. So
Good,
it kept
good.
rolling.
yes,
It kept rolling.
another check in the positive column for this new platform we're working
Yeah.
with.
Yeah.
So anyways, I was just saying how, I think it's amazing and how we've kind of proven that if you start with yourself and you work outward from there, you can have a massive impact, right? And telling the story about Todd and moving his family to Hawaii, we can see the direct impact on Todd, but what we don't see is how's that impacting his colleagues? How's that impacting his friends that saw him make this move? And and I think it's important for us to take some time to meditate on that and think like, man, we're making a difference. And again, it might be hard because a lot of these things that I think we're making a massive difference on aren't really even related to analytics, right? And I often tell people, I think we're the world's most experts in this digital analytics space. But honestly, it's an excuse a lot of times to get in and just change the way people work and think. That's what I get the most enjoyment out of. The work just kind of, it's like, yeah, we're really good at it, but we just need an excuse to get in there to kind of shake things up and make you happier at work,
Yeah.
So, anyway.
A principal level, analytics architect and principal level human. Very good at humaning.
We're good at being the humans. So
We are.
Yeah.
Not that I'm amazing at being I'm not a flawless human. That is not what I'm saying. I'm good at being vulnerable and full of mistakes.
And that's what humans are, right? We're all vulnerable. We're all full of mistakes. We're all, we always think that everyone else has it together and has all the answers, and we don't, right? Like none of us do. We're all figuring it out and we're all making mistakes. And I think the more we're able to be comfortable with that, I think the deeper and the richer the relationships we can establish, because you take down that wall that need to be defensive and perfect. And it's just like, man, this feels so comfortable,
Yeah.
It feels so good.
Well, I can be incredibly socially awkward. Like I'm the one who will stutter through something, will combine two different words or phrases. And I'm also the one who decided he wanted to start a podcast.
Yeah.
So go figure.
and we're what, like 117?
This is like 100. This is episode like 113.
It's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Way to go, Jim. Well, you could have just cashed it in and just been good as the mascot and not had to talk to anybody. But I'm glad that you did this and you overcame your fears. And this podcast has been awesome. And in fact, I had a guy reach out to me, Alex, who we interviewed, and was one of the final candidates. We ended up hiring Jason Bull, but this guy Alex is really super amazing. I kind of wish I had the budget to just hire both. It sucks how it comes down to that sometimes. But him and I have stayed in touch, and he reached out the other day and just said, "Hey, I wanted to say thank you for putting together the podcast and continuing to put it out there. I listen to it all the time. You guys have had some very timely subjects, and I really appreciate it." So
That's great.
You're definitely making a difference, Jim. So I'm glad you kind of were uncomfortable to get this thing going, because it's been good.
Well, thank you. So this. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, if we were to tie it all up in a bow, I'd pretty much just say it's about putting yourself out there and being vulnerable and real, and being kind then when others are vulnerable and real.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And it's those that put themselves out there that get somewhere. So I put my totally socially awkward self out there and drag others and say, "You're coming with me."
and we went along, and it's been awesome. So, and this has been a good conversation. Again, I think very timely. And again, if we can give a little bit of advice as people walk away, I don't know what the business world's going to look like, as there's some kind of normalcy we return to later this year, next year, who knows when. And if we go back to the way things were, I think it would be sad. I definitely think there'll be some lessons learned. I don't think it will be exactly that way, but I definitely don't think that the autonomy and the freedom we have now will be 100% replicated when we go back into the office. It just won't happen. So, take advantage of this time and explore it and find out how amazing it is to have this. And again, to be human. Don't hide yourself on Zoom and backgrounds, and just take advantage of this time to be normal and human. It's okay. We all want more of that.
Yeah, don't have the perfectly curated bookshelf with all of the high-end literature you didn't read.
That's right. Yeah. If I had a dime for every book, I have a problem buying books. Yeah.
Yeah. As somebody who's moving this week, I definitely. Yeah. Books are heavy.
Although I was reading an argument on it. it tends to come up, and I can't remember, was it John Narong who said that, oh, there's like a Japanese word for that where you just like have
Yes.
and I've been thinking about that ever since. But then I was reading this article this morning, and they're like, who cares if you buy a book and then you never end up reading it? Like the return on an investment on a book is so massive, right? Like if you just take one good idea out of a book, I mean, we're talking about $15 for a book. I mean, and if only one good thing comes out of it, that's massive. Like think how much we pay to go watch a stupid movie or, pay to take courses. It's like, so don't feel bad about buying a book and not finishing it or not even reading it, because the cost is so low and the upside is so massive.
Hmm. Even if moving them is a pain.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, good luck with the move and
Yes,
congratulations.
good luck.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Lots of opportunity to be human with that.
Cool. Well, thank you both much for joining us this week. It was a really fun conversation, and we'll go ahead and wrap up there.
Yeah,
All right.
thanks for the
Jen.
invite.
Thanks,
Cool.
Jen.
Hey, thank you.
Bye.